Welcome to day 4, one of my personal favorites. If you've been stretching your hip flexors with no relief, this one's for you. Today, we're creating true length and strength through the hip flexors and lats. And it's not just by stretching, but by repositioning the pelvis, ribcage, and femur. Tightness in the psoas is often a compensation, whether it's from weak abdominals, a compressed back ribs, or overactive deep rotators of the hip. Today's session will help restore balance. We'll work on improving femur position, activating the glutes, and training opposing muscles, and work both eccentric and flexed hip positions. You'll also train your lats, this often forgotten piece that connects the ribcage and pelvis and can contribute to that compressed, tight feeling. You're going to leave feeling more open, powerful, and more connected from head to toe. Let's get after it. Welcome back to our Advanced Core Challenge. Today, our concept that we're exploring for your core is your hip flexors and your lats. So we're going to think about finding length and strengthening those muscles that can commonly give you trouble in your body. So I've got Kara and Melissa doing the workout alongside you. Equipment you need are dumbbells or kettlebells. Just keep them light, nothing super heavy. A Pilates ball, your wall, a yoga block or a towel can substitute for that. A bench will be optional for one of our movements, and then a mini band and a long band. So we are actually going to get started with a psoas release. This is where you're going to grab that Pilates ball, small child's ball if you have it, and you're going to put it just in the area where that hip flexor lives. So just between that lower core, and you're going to come down to the ground and lay on top of that ball. So basically you want it to be nice and soft. You never want to come in there with anything too aggressive, and you can put that, bias it to more one side than the other, and you'll take 5 breaths on one side, and then you will take 5 breaths on the opposite. So as you see, Kara starts to lay over that ball. Looks great. She's come back in space with her body. What we don't want to see is if Kara didn't have that ball or if she was too extended through the spine. So you want to think about like a flexion moment happening, and you see it more on this side where she has the ball. And the reason for that is, while you're staying and breathing, I'll kind of tell you a little bit of the why of the psoas, is that it inserts or it attaches at both the lumbar spine and at the femur. So it travels from our rib to pelvis. Big key player when we talk about our core. So connecting those two entities we've been talking about, and it also connects to the diaphragm. And so what often happens is we have tightness through this muscle, and it feels like tightness because it's living in a shortened position. And this happens when we have a lot of compression in the back of our rib cage. So maybe as we've done some breathing, you've started to feel better already. But essentially an extension pattern in the body creates compression, and it creates shortening of that psoas, and it also is often related to tightness of the lats, which connect to the sacrum and pull that forward. So you can see how we need to find a balance between both of those muscles to be able to allow the pelvis to shift out of that position. So that ball is helping us shift back, and you're going to see a lot of the movements that we're looking at today focusing on that. So we're going to come into a long lever bridge on the wall. And this is where you're going to want to have a yoga block, and you're going to put that yoga block in the upright position next to the wall. Now, where that yoga block is where your working leg is going to go. You're going to put your foot on the wall. Our same long lever bridge concepts apply here, which is finding that tripod foot, so the base of the big toe, baby toe, and the heel. And then you slide out a little bit more long lever. And then I want you to come into that proximal hamstring. So you're going to lift up just slightly. And with this foot on the wall, you're going to think about pushing into the wall and dragging down through the heel. And you're going to reach the same side arm long. What we're going to do is as you inhale, you're going to think about finding more length as if those fingertips are reaching overhead. As you exhale, you're holding this isometric position and you're pushing into the wall and dragging down into the block. And inhale is your reach. Exhale, you push and drag. So what we're trying to do is create some more active hip extension. We're creating length through the front of the body, which you just talked about with that psoas, but we're also activating the opposing muscle group to allow that muscle to start to relax. And so we can do this with gentle isometrics first. So we're holding this lengthened position, we're activating the opposing muscle of hip extension, and then we're using our patterns of breathing, especially with the lats, to hold that lengthened position with the arm overhead. Probably hit about 5 or 8 breaths, so we'll switch to the opposite side. You move your block and then you set up in the same position. So the arm stays overhead the whole time. You're thinking about breathing into that back body of the extended arm, so that back rib cage. And then as you hold that position, sorry, this leg's gonna come up, so you're more in the, long lever. Kara, you come down a little bit more in those hips. Yep. And then have that right leg floating. There you go. So as you inhale, you reach long. Exhale as you drag. You can bring your hips a little lower to the ground, so more long lever. Perfect. As you inhale, you reach. We're breathing into the back rib cage. We exhale, we press and drag. We're getting length through the entire front body. Good. Now what I want you to do is you can grab that yoga block or you can grab a light weight, and we're going to set up in a long lever bridge with both feet on the wall. And you're going to grab that block or weight in your hands. And we're just going to explore the idea of our lats and their engagement on this. So lift up into your long lever. So you drag through the heels, you come up just slightly. And then we're going to press with the hands slightly into the block as we reach overhead. Exhale as you come overhead. With that reach, we're putting those lats in a lengthened position, and then we can pull that block just up and over. So you imagine this could be a lat strengthening movement. We've got our hamstrings on board. But this long lever position also represents the ability to allow that psoas to come back into more of that flexion that we're putting it in and allowing it to relax. Now we said from the front, the psoas has that attachment to the ribs and pelvis. And in the back, our body movements can be restricted by tight lats. So as we reach overhead, we need to keep those ribs down. And so you might start to learn how those two entities play off of each other in your body. So we'll do about like 8 of those as you're starting to reach overhead and slightly press into that block. Go ahead and flip on over onto hands and knees. We're going to do a bird dog with a single leg extension at the wall. So bird dog is opposite arm, opposite leg reaching. What you're going to do is you're going to stay close enough to the wall that as you extend your leg, you can get the foot to the wall, and then they could drag their heel isometrically up the wall to turn on the hamstrings and more hip extension. So as you reach opposite arm and leg, you're going to crunch on an inhale, breathing into the back body. Exhale, you reach the leg to the wall, the arm goes long, you drag the heel isometrically up the wall, turn that hip extension on. Inhale as your crunch. Let's do 10 of those. So you're breathing into the back body here. So as Kara crunches and rounds, she inhales, she's got space, we're back body breathing. She extends and she drags the foot isometrically. On that exhale, the abs are in a lengthened position. We're lengthening the front body to allow that psoas to relax a little bit. And when we get the drag of the heel, we start to engage that hip extension to be able to, again, activate opposing muscles for that psoas to strengthen and create more balance. So 10, and then we'll switch to the opposite side. So keeping that wrist under shoulder, drag that knee to elbow, inhale. Exhale, leg to the wall as you reach the opposite arm long, and then you drag that foot up isometrically. Nice job. All the same while we're doing all of these things, we're paying attention to our initial goal of our rib to pelvis stack. So I told you in the beginning, your psoas attaches to both. If you were to do a bird dog with every single one of these movements or reps, and you're losing your stack of your ribs and pelvis, and maybe you're extending forward or your pelvis is spilling forward, you might wonder why you have that chronic psoas tension happening. Or is it really because we're not keeping our stack through these movements? So if an extension pattern of the body represents this shortened position, and every time you extend and crunch, you're losing your pelvis position, what if you keep that locked in and then we start to add some more strength through that extended leg? All right, here's where you need your yoga block or a towel. We're gonna do a rock and roll. So Melissa's using the block. She's going to put it the wide way, and she's going to sandwich it between her forearms. And then she's going to bring her forearms up just in front of her. And she's going to squeeze gently against that block. So as she squeezes, she's getting protraction through the shoulder blades. She's going to inhale into that back body. Kara has got the towel. She's going to hold it out extended. And they're both going to roll back, and they're going to inhale as they roll. Exhale, they're going to come up, and then they're going to lean back and rotate. There you go. So you can see Kara's just using the tension of the towel. Melissa's got the block, which allows us to get more posterior expansion as we move. And the inhale, rock it back. When we rock back on an inhale, we send more breath to that posterior rib cage we've talked about since day one. Not only does that help us get expansion, but this position of the short seat that we come up into helps this total shift back of ribs and pelvis in space, which again is going to allow that psoas to come out of that aggravated extended position. We'll do about 10. Your inhale, you roll back. Feel space being pushed into the back body through that inhale. And you exhale as you rotate, coming into that position. Nice job, guys. This is a fun one. It's okay to use momentum and then come up to that controlled position as you lean back. Awesome. Just to reiterate on that one, when we talk about our psoas, we talk about these extended positions. When we get into a short seated position, we get a better shift back of the ribs and pelvis in space from this. And so we start to, again, use exercise to solidify the changes we want to see in our resting posture. All right, grab a dumbbell. We're going to come down onto the ground. We're going to get into a little bit more strength focused work. And this one is going to be hook lying. So that's on your back with your knees bent and feet on the ground. And then you're going to lay on back. You're going to set your core up for this one. So you're going to take an inhale with that dumbbell between both hands. And you're going to exhale as you draw the core in and those ribs come down and reach the weight overhead. Now we're just going to hold the weight here the entire time, and then you're going to slide one leg out long against the wall like a heel slide, and you're going to exhale, and then you can inhale, draw that foot back in, and then you could alternate. So if you have socks and a smooth wood floor, you can quite literally just slide it. What you want to think about is keeping the ribs and pelvis stable as we send that leg out. The weight helps this shift back that we were just talking about, this rib cage shift. So if you constantly are cranking on the psoas, if you don't get the ribs to actually not only come down, but back in space, we're not allowing it to come out of that aggravated position. So this is how our rib and pelvis connection plays a bigger role in the rest of our body. But we're also getting a lengthened position of the abs. So we saw eccentric abs just previously in the challenge, a lengthened position. Before we get to some more loaded hip strengthening, which we'll come into, we want to have the ability to load and lengthen first eccentrically. So just like our eccentric abs, we want to be able to lengthen through the front of the hip. So we'll do about 15 to 20 total, kind of just exploring how the weight helps the ribs shift back and create this bigger picture for the psoas, while we also lengthen the psoas at its connection at the femur. Nice. All right, we're going to come into a little bit more eccentric strengthening with a little more load, and we're going to do a reverse Nordic. So Melissa's going to grab her bench. She's going to show us an option. This is where the bench is optional with a weight, and Kara's going to show us with the long band. So essentially, each of these positions is giving you support so that you can eccentrically start to control and create some challenge through the proximal hip flexor. So in Kara's position, she's using that band to help her body come back. And you see Kara's keeping a nice stack. So as you come back, we don't want to lose the rib to pelvis connection. If we lose that, not only do we compromise our core, but the focus of today on our psoas is going to feel aggravated too. If we thrust forward and lose that, we're also pushing that psoas into that shortened position. Now, Melissa is showing us a different option. Maybe kneeling isn't for you, or that feels like a little too much what Kara's doing. Melissa's got support of the weight for her feet while she eccentrically controls an exhale and leans back. You could reach those arms forward. You could squeeze a yoga block to again help create length through the entire trunk from the ribs to the pelvis. So we're lengthening our hip flexors. Nice. Eccentric length and control. We'll do about 10 of those. So first we started with some iso loading to lengthen, allow that psoas to kind of come back and release. We're working on the rib to pelvis shift that allows that to continue to happen. Eccentrically lengthening at the femur. And then we're going to talk about how do we load that challenge then too. And you're going to see that with our next movement, which is a bear with an alternating knee drive. So you can grab your mini band if you have one, and if you don't, that's okay. We're going to come over to the wall. They're going to put the mini band around the feet. And now we're going to load that hip flexion strength. So remember, the feet on the wall helps us feel supported and anchored in space, again, especially for hypermobile, but it also just helps give reference for those hamstrings as well. So you can start to push into the wall with the feet just slightly, because what you're going to see is they're going to slightly come forward and drive that knee to the elbow, getting that hip flexor activated and loaded. Nice. So now we're loading. We were lengthening, now we're loading into a more contracted position as they come back. And the whole goal here is that you're still maintaining your stack each time. So if we stack the ribs and pelvis, we work with our core system, and we're also working on strengthening for a better outcome for those muscles that can inhibit our ability to maintain our stack. So that psoas and those lats, is it the chicken or the egg? Either way, we need to work on all of those concepts together. Now, maybe the band is too much, and that's okay as well. You just come into that bear position without the band, drive the knee toward the elbow. Let's do about 20 total. Get a good challenge there in seeing what that feels like. Good job. Choose your band wisely. Drive. Now we're using that hip flexor when the ribs and pelvis are in a nice position to get that strength through the front of the hip. All right. Let's look at this hip flexion of loading in a more powerful way. You're going to come from a half kneeling position, and you're going to stand and drive as you come into a hop. So you want to think about loading that hip flexion that we just did. So kind of exploring all of these different ways we can load and lengthen. So lengthening load with our reverse Nordics. Contractile as we drive, and now putting it into more powerful movements like a stand to a hop. So something powerful, more athletic, but in your mind, connecting these dots, ribs to pelvis as you come back, and then drive, keeping the ribs to pelvis as well. If you drive up into that power hop and you're here, you're extending, you're thrusting through the ribs, you're not getting that core connection. And again, the more you keep putting this extension pattern into the body all the time, you might start to realize why it adds up for those chronic pains or those annoying things like that hip flexor tension and tightness. Nice job. Drive up with the stack. All right, one more movement we're gonna do. We're gonna do bear with a walkout. You've seen this a little bit, but I want you to pay a little bit more attention to the lats here. So you can find a wall, and we're gonna come onto hands and knees, and we're just gonna walk our arms out long. So with those feet on the wall, again, you can drag through the toes. Get the hamstrings on, get your stacks, the ribs over pelvis, and walk the arms out long and take an inhale and exhale. Then exhale, walk back, hands underneath shoulders. Inhale and exhale. Walk the arms out long. So this, pay more attention here to your lats. This is also eccentric abs, and this is the first day that you saw this, was when we put the abs in a lengthened position. But I just really want you to start to notice those lats here. We talk about how the lats attach to both the rib cage and sacrum as well. So it's like the opposing muscle that the psoas is the same thing. Two muscles in the front and back of the body that attach both of those entities. And also two muscles that are often super cranky in a lot of our bodies. And we start to realize the balance and the pull that they have on each other, or how those muscles might restrict our rib to pelvis connection and why we struggle with our core strengthening if that's something we've been working on. So paying extra attention that as those arms come out, what does that impact on your rib cage? Do you struggle to keep those ribs in place? Do your ribs want to thrust forward? And again, putting those muscles in the lengthened position to work. So we'll do about 12 to 15. And then wrap it up with one more movement to kind of help us come out of our movement for the day. Good. All right, grab your Pilates ball. We are going to lay right down on top of it, and you're going to put the ball underneath the front of the hip, just like we started. So again, we're just going to start where we finish a little bit. It's often called crocodile. Sometimes we move the ball up underneath the rib cage. But again, the important thing is here is that as you lay on that ball, you don't want to be extending through the body. So you want to think about it pushing you back in space. If you need a little bit more sensation, you could try layering a yoga block and then the ball to push that body almost back into more flexion. So why don't you take 5 breaths just like this? That ball not only can be a little bit like a massage tool to the psoas, but it also just helps push the body back. So why don't you just keep thinking about these extension patterns, and we can start to create our shifts of our body together. We allow those muscles to relax. So sometimes they get villainized, and then we stretch them and we stretch them and we do even more, and we keep putting them into even more extension, when sometimes they are just responding to our overall body position. So it's not always that muscle is the one to blame. It's just put in a position that it's not working well. So working through the front of the hip, they've switched their ball. Think about flexion. We want the glutes relaxed. So we don't want to be pushing forward. Good. Now take your ball, come onto your side. I want you to put it underneath the middle third of your rib cage and bend your knees. We're just going to do some lateral rib cage expansion. You can bend your knees forward, Kara, like 90. Yep. And try to just relax. And so you can have your head supported, but basically that ball is going to compress the lower ribs, and you can breathe into these top ribs. So if Kara wanted to kind of cup her rib cage, she'd be able to inhale and feel that expansion at the top and the compression happening. So remember, if we're talking about all of the psoas, its attachments to the rib cage and the diaphragm, we get our diaphragm moving too. We get our psoas to also move. And when we have the space in our rib cage for movement to happen, then we're going to be able to shift back more easily as well. So it's not always just one focus, it's bringing all those concepts together. Why don't we go ahead and switch to the opposite side to wrap it up? As you're breathing into that top rib cage, you're also getting that back expansion as well. So you think about, as Kara's got her hands cupped, she's feeling here, and she can feel in that area of the bra band, just getting that expansion into the side and back body. About 3 breaths. Good. Take your time slowly coming on up. I hope you enjoyed today exploring the role of the psoas in our core and also why it might become that cranky muscle for you. And hopefully you're feeling better after trying some of those new movements. I will see you as we move through the rest of our core challenge.